Well, welcome. I'm Peter Shergold, the head of the Centre for Social Impact, and I'm delighted that this evening's Yakety Yak is being hosted by one of our key sponsors, AMP. In a moment I'm going to be joined by Peter Thompson, who is our interlocutor for Yakety Yak. And his guest this evening is quite literally a star. It is, of course, Robyn Archer, singer, cabaret performer, writer, director, and perhaps most important from my point of view, an extraordinarily strong advocate for public arts. We're going to discover much more about Robyn in the half-hour, 40-minute interview ahead. So please welcome Peter Thompson and Robyn Archer.
Thank you. Good evening. I think, Robyn, we should start on a word of nostalgia, picking up what Matthew was saying earlier. Your first visit to Sydney, this building was then Sydney's tallest. Yeah. And you came here because you won a prize.
Yes, a talent quest.
They were onto you from the early days.
Well, you know, if there'd been Australian Idol then, I would have been in it, because it's those, contests that was fighting for boys and singing for girls. Edith Piaf, the only way out of the suburbs was to kind of be famous. So I won the first prize in the Channel 9ers Junior Talent Quest. The first prize...
How old were you?
15. Mm-hmm. And the first prize was an all-expenses paid trip to appear on WIN4 Wollongong. So my mum and I flew up here, had a couple of days in Sydney, and then took the train to Wollongong. And I still remember, I've got the lovely little old-fashioned snaps, black and white snaps of this building to this day. It was a fantastic icon, and I'm so glad to see it's been preserved so beautifully.
You were a regular on Bandstand, weren't you?
I was, yeah. About a year later, I sort of got the feel for contests. And about a year later, I entered a contest which was called Bandstand Starflight International. And the year after I was in it, Helen Reddy came first, so it was a serious contest. I think I was in 64. I've still got the vinyl of the finalists. There were 4 folk singers in the 7 or 8 finalists, and for being in the finals, which I didn't win, the following year, in my last year in high school, I came up to appear on Bandstand 4 times. So that was when I was the head prefect.
Unaccompanied.
Yep.
Unaccompanied.
And I used to rock up to the teachers, a total little smart ass, and say, sorry, I won't be at school for the next period. I've got to make my Bandstand appearance. But it was pretty hefty, I used to fly up. They put us up in the Chevron Hilton, and we'd sing on the show, and I have to say there were many life-changing experiences. There were encounters with rather morally questionable long-haired American folk singers. That was a good education for a girl, beating them off in the tall grass in King's Cross. I was 16. And there were many good experiences. I think my life really changed by doing those 4 trips and looking after myself in that year. It was great.
Unlike children these days, who all say they want to be famous, it used to be unfashionable to want to be famous. But I think you've wanted to be famous from the earliest days, haven't you?
Yeah, probably, yeah. I mean, I was put out in front at 4 by my great-grandmother to sing on the tables of the British Hotel in North Adelaide, to sing for the customers in the last hour of trading. It was 6 o'clock closing. So I was made to sing, and my dad was a singer. Dad was a beautiful singer, and he was a funny comedian, although, as many people know, this has made me allergic to comedy because, I'm an only child, so there's mum, me and dad practising his routines on us at the dinner table. So that cured me of comedy. I find paying for comedy an obscene act, sort of akin to paying for sex, so I just don't do it. I like naturally funny people. I'm sort of really allergic to gags, as it were, although I do tell a lot of my dad's gags very well. I saw Dad go through a phase. My first gigs that I did, apart from this little thing when I was 4, my first real gigs were with Dad in his charity shows once a month.
At clubs?
No, not at clubs. He did clubs. He was an MC, weddings, parties, everything. He sang the wedding for the Anglicans, and he sang Ave Maria for the Catholics when he sang it at weddings. There was a thing that happened then. It's only now I realise how soon that was after the Second World War. And so every Sunday, once a month, each agency in Adelaide put on a variety show on Sunday morning for returned soldiers. And so these shows were completely variety. They were a couple of dancing girls, a comedian, MC, a few singers, a magic act, a bloke that would lie on nails, all that, total variety. And there were these old guys that they'd bring out of homes, and they were shell-shocked, and they used to get cigarettes and lollies and a show. And so my first real gig was in one of those shows. And Dad was really good at all that, and I really loved his voice. He was very, very classy. But television just killed him off because he just didn't have the face. And he also went on a talent show called Stairway to the Stars, which was in Adelaide. And, I can remember Mum and I sort of cringing, thinking, oh, he's really not very good on telly, like really being embarrassed because he was a live performer. Huh? Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, he just didn't work in the televisual mode. So whether it was something to do with that then spurred me on, or just something in the genes that wanted to perform, and yeah, my first instinct, I go back and I've got an interview that I did when I was about 14, and it says that all I wanted to do was meet people and travel. Like now, I never want to meet another person, and I never want to get on another plane. Be careful what you wish for, because boy did I get it.
Let's stay with childhood just a bit longer. You were born in a caravan, is that so?
Not quite. No, that's a myth. I was born in a little now demolished private hospital called Berkeley Hospital on Prospect Road in Adelaide, and the family unit was in a caravan at the back of my maternal grandmother's house. So when I was actually very small, I was in the house. Dad was still in the caravan. So they owned a shop when I was born. It was a delicatessen in Colonel Light Gardens, and that's when I was born. But then Mum stayed at her mum's house, which was sort of that was the house that we all went to through the 50s, where all the country people came down, because Mum was born on the banks of the Murray, so we all had river people as family, and they would all come down to Nana and Papa's on the Sundays. Everyone would have the roast, then we'd play in the afternoon, then have the cold cuts at lunch, and then the men would play cribbage with my great-grandfather around the big table, and the ladies would all go into the living room, and we'd listen to the Sunday radio show, and they'd knit, and my mum would play the piano a bit. So I kind of grew up. I was really lucky in many respects, I think, both in that family life and in my show business life. I sort of caught the end of an era. I think I was just on the end. I don't know whether it's true for all baby boomers, but I was just on the end of an era. Vaudeville as such has sort of come back in a retro kitsch form, but I really got variety in vaudeville. I learnt my timing and my performative things from comedians, people like Ray McGeary, Keith Peterson for a while. These Mick Lane comedians, they were old style vaudevillians, and I played the soubrette in these shows.
A big deal for you is getting asthma.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, it was very bad. I was born with eczema, every skin disease known to man, and I got rid of that at 2 and I traded it for asthma. And I was a very brief period when I didn't have asthma, but essentially I've had it for the whole time. And it did do a lot of things for me, because I think it really was touch and go for a while, that I might have died. There were several blue-in-the-face incidents where I had to be rushed into the Children's Hospital in Adelaide. What it did for me essentially was give me a kind of work methodology, and that was that because I knew I would be sick every winter, I'd have to be in bed. My mum would cycle down to the school and get my work for me. I'd want to get ahead. So once the asthma started to recede, once puberty hit, and I think this is fairly normal for asthmatics, you go into another phase, and there are other reasons to live, and things loosen up in all parts of the body. And so at puberty it subsided, but I never did get out of the habit of being early. for things, not needing, I'm not
Being
someone...
well prepared.
I never need a deadline. I have many projects at one time and they're always lined up at various levels of execution, and when I get to the natural end of one bit I'll go to another one, and so they're just all advancing. But I also do literally wake up if I ever feel the need to set an alarm. I wake up exactly 1 minute before the alarm goes off and turn it off. So there's something in the body clock that is about knowing time management. I never ever have to get woken up.
The hidden observer. but you were also from that young age quite driven. I mean, the reason you would prepare in advance was because you had quite strong goals and ambitions for yourself.
Yes, I don't know how much it's goals and ambitions. I have one really totally fantastic crackpot theory about that. The treatment for asthma in the 50s was a penicillin shot in the behind to get rid of any of the infection, and then adrenaline, intravenous adrenaline is what they did to keep you open. And I have a theory that I was so shot full of adrenaline that when I didn't get it anymore, I started overproducing my own, so that I would always put myself into positions of fear. And that's getting onto the stage and doing too much and having too much to do, and constantly, you think I would have grown out of it, but I didn't.
and you go so far as to say you sort of welcome fear, that sort of stage fright that overwhelms so many performers.
Yeah, I would be worried if I didn't get nervous before I did a show. It does always make me feel nervous, and the beginning of any project is always very nerve-wracking. Anything new is quite nerve-wracking for me. But
you go after it though, don't you?
Yeah. I'm happy to take on. There's a bit of a no fear. I guess somewhere I know that I'm capable if I put my mind to it. But yeah, there's always a bit of fearfulness when I go into it. And I think it is adrenaline producing that kind of keeps me going.
So at 12 or 13, I guess most people had guessed you were singing, but probably what most people don't know is you were painting.
Yeah. Well, up till 12 or 13, it was... I was winning prizes for all the visual stuff, more competitions.
And you've still got a lot of those paintings?
I have got a few of them, yeah. There was a wonderful exhibition in Adelaide called the Advertiser Open Air Art Exhibition, and it was huge, and it was all across the banks of the Torrens. So there are newspaper reports and photographs of me as the youngest ever exhibitor in that exhibition, meeting the governor, who was Sir Robert George at the time. So yeah, very highly visual, doing all that. When I was, there were very few books in the house, so it wasn't bookish at all. I'd started to read, that thing where you just want to read lots of books, so you knock one off in the series and then you knock the other one off. It's less about the reading than actually getting the volume of books under your belt. And we didn't have very many books in the house. What books were there? More magazines. Mum collected photoplay. She loved movies. I went to films from when I was 4, when Mum and Dad were working in the hotel we lived in, which was his grandparents' hotel.
Could art have been a path for you?
Yeah, I think now I look at it, it really could have, because at about 12, I discovered, it must have been through a friend, Mary Martin's bookshop in Adelaide, and this was, I don't think I'd really, there were many things
Still there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, in a way, yes it is, it's in a reformed way. There were many things that I didn't realise I'd never done at an early age, like had never really been to a restaurant until I was about 18. A Coles cafeteria was about it, so it was a girlfriend that took me to a Chinese restaurant in Adelaide for the first time. And I discovered this bookstore, and I used to go in and wander, and from then on Mum and Dad gave me book vouchers for birthdays, and I found a beautiful little book on Cubism. And so I do still have I was trying to layer on watercolour so it was as thick as oils. I didn't have oils at that stage, and I've still got these copies of a Braque, a Juan Gris and a Picasso miniatures this size, and they're really fantastic. And I realise in retrospect that, of course, what I was doing is what visual artists do in the beginning of their careers, and that's they copy the masters, and I was doing it. Alas, the education system at the time streamed me into the top science stream. It was a school of 1,800 students, Enfield High. There was no music at all, and I was not allowed to do woodwork or domestic science or art. So it sort of stopped it, really, in its tracks.
So you were the first in the family to go to university, not an unusual thing in those days.
Indeed.
To Adelaide University, where you did an honours degree.
Yep.
And studied classics,
Well, English language and literature, and Latin, yeah. But the English course in that days was, again, slightly the end of an era. It was a very formal course, so I did Old and Middle English and semantics and stuff in there, and it was fantastic. I loved it.
Your parents were very keen for you to be a school teacher.
Well, I think they thought that if I'd got the teaching scholarship, which I did in my 4th year, if I'd got a teaching scholarship, then there would be a bit of money coming in. So I got a Commonwealth scholarship and a teaching scholarship, and they would have been very keen. And I guess, yeah, it would have been a respectable job. I imagine, especially my mum, who'd seen my dad go through a heap of not particularly secure jobs. We were talking earlier about the credit squeeze in 61 when he was working as a mechanic in a car yard. He'd always sang. He'd sing 3 or 4 nights a week, but he'd get a job like a car mechanic in a used car sale block. It went bust. He had to go truck driving to the Northern Territory, was going up to Mount Isa in Queensland. My mum and I remember crying for 3 weeks when he went away, and then when he came back he became a door-to-door AMP insurance salesman.
Well, we can celebrate that here today.
And he did that for a few years. So I suppose Mum was really concerned, again, as I think probably many people were in that era, that you'd get a secure job of some kind. What happened was, in the end, there was a fairly rigid a bond agreement that you had to enter. If you got a teaching scholarship, you had to remain tenured to the education department until you'd paid your bond off. There were only 2 clauses in which, if you defaulted, your parents had to pay all the money back, and one was asthma. So I pleaded with them to get my Commonwealth scholarship back on the deal that if they gave me room and board, I would sing for my supper. I would pay for everything else, clothes. I bought my first a little bike with a motor on it, and then a motorbike, and I paid for everything else. So I think, of course they were very proud of me and what I achieved, but I think secretly it was not very long ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when a friend said to me that in the kitchen privately with me not there, my mother said to her, "Oh, it was at university, Robyn really went off the rails there." So I think she secretly harboured that desire.
Well, you ended up getting a place in the Phillip Street Revue in Sydney.
I did indeed.
Which was another big deal.
It was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I came to Sydney in 1970 with a wonderful man called Keith Peterson. Keith was a song and dance man who'd played the touring show of The Odd Couple. He was very well known. He actually did the Channel 10. I saw the DVD recently of the opening of Channel 10, and he hosted a whole musical about the opening of Channel 10. So he brought me up here, and I started doing leagues clubs. It was really interesting. I was not bad at the leagues clubs. I sort of knew what they needed, but I came to realise I didn't like doing what they needed. I saw Lorraine Desmond in her absolute element, sitting on blokes' knees saying, "You made me love you, I didn't wanna." And they'd go, "Do it." And everybody would laugh, and you all had to sing "Rollin', Rollin' on the River" as your opening number. So it was very formulaic, and I kind of did a version of that. I wore, my mum sewed me. She was a tailoress by trade. And she sewed me these wonderful, like an orange sequin gown with a diamond cut in here, like slinky, and I had very long hair, used to shin on it all up. So I could kind of do that, but then I'd come out and do a few seekers or, popular numbers, but then I was starting to choose my repertoire from the great African-American singers like Della Reese and Eartha Kitt, etc. And then I'd whip out the washboard, and I had Mary Schneider, Australia's Queen of Yodeling, and I had horns and a klaxon and everything. So if you say, "When I'm cleaning windows," I was never quite right, it was just a little bit, but it's kind of worked. But I did audition for the Phillip Theatre Revue, and I won the audition, and that was in 1970. So my career I would have immediately gone into the world of Noel Ferrier and all those guys that were doing that. Won the audition, and 3 weeks later I had a massive motorbike accident and sort of basically, was lying on Gardeners Road with my head dripping all over the ground. It wasn't my fault at all, and it had a great silver lining story in the end. But I lost the contract, of course. I was broke. I did a few different jobs in Sydney and had a pathetic return to Adelaide, where I thought I'd do a diploma of education because I found out that a degree didn't help. It didn't get you a job.
And subsequently you taught for some years.
Couple of years. I did an independent diploma of education and just taught for 2.5 years. And then eventually art came into my life at that, so things changed.
One big question for you is what brought you to the music of Bertolt Brecht, the songs of Brecht?
Well, as I say about my career, it's a sequence of generous offers from very kind men. There's just a series of blokes who said, would you like to do this? And I said yes, every step of the way. In this case, I was back in Adelaide. I'd done the dip ed. I'd taught a year at Elizabeth High School, where you had to be a social worker, and then I went to Presbyterian Girls High School, where I could be a teacher. I was Robyn Miss Smith by day, teaching English, and at night I was singing in a Dirty Dick's tavern 5 nights a week, and when questioned, I lied to the headmistress. Miss Smith, some parents believe that they've seen you entertaining in a Dirty Dick's tavern. Oh, no, Miss Davis, couldn't have been me. I wouldn't do that. So for a while I had 2 names and 2 full-time jobs. And then it was a man called Justin McDonnell, who was the administrator of New Opera South Australia, which was the forerunner of the State Opera. They just, because contemporary opera wasn't being done in Adelaide, they did it in people's living rooms, etc. And they were about to open the Space Theatre in the Adelaide Festival Centre with Brecht and Weil's The Seven Deadly Sins. They wanted somebody who was untrained in the way that Kurt Weil's wife, Lottie Lenya, had been untrained when she first sang the work. And so Justin remembered me from university reviews, and they said, do you want to do this? So I was invited in to sing with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra. I couldn't read a note. So I just had to learn it by heart with a very painstaking repetiteur, and did it, and then life changed completely.
So this is the 70s, and in 2010-11, you're thinking about, you've been invited to
Brecht's birthplace, yeah. Augsburg, yeah.
Are you going to do that?
Yeah, I hope so, yes. That'll be next February.
Remarkable.
That was as a result of a recital we did in Honolulu earlier this year at the International Brecht Symposium. And they've said, come over to sing in Augsburg. So
and then I saw you in A Star Is Torn. I saw you in Hobart. I'm sure you visited Hobart. At the Theatre Royal. And that became both your biggest success in one respect, financially perhaps, but also a tremendous bane for your life because it was so successful.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was a bane. It was good. I mean, I did it for about 4 years. We did an initial production in 1979 in Melbourne. And then in 80 we toured it a bit, and it did get, it'd be like her, it'd be sort of like John Waters now. I think it was somebody who was instantly recognisable, and I felt like I couldn't move very much. So I went to the States and did a bit of voice training with an extremely good actor's voice teacher called Rowena Balos, and then went on to Germany and learned a bit of German, and went to Vienna, went and studied at the Berliner Ensemble, which was really fantastic. And then afterwards came back after the Brecht stuff and did A Star Is Torn again in London, recorded some of the stuff there, and then we brought it back for a final tour. So 4 years on and off I was doing it. It was like a marathon. In the West End in London it went for a year. So the only way I got 3 days off was by the fortune of Christmas Day happening on a Saturday. And the West End doesn't play on Christmas Eve, so I got Friday, Saturday and Sunday off. Beautiful Christmas. A friend was visiting her parents in New Brighton, up across the Mersey from Liverpool, and they had a little house in Snowdonia, a little cabin in Snowdonia. So I went to Wainwright and Daughters in London. I got beautiful fish and vegetables. She dumped me at the cabin. She went off to New Brighton, and the only thing I saw on Christmas Day was sheep. I went walking and it was absolutely fantastic. So it was a marathon. I used to walk in, I was living in Primrose Hill, Belsize Gardens really. I'd walk through Primrose Hill, through the gardens, through the park, into the West End. It was about an hour and a half walk. Then I'd warm up vocally, and then I'd make up, and I'd leave the flat at about 4:30, and that was to make an 8 o'clock show. I reckon after the show, it was 2 hours of singing with just 2 pianos, just me.
And of course, for anyone that's not aware of it, it was this ability to actually shift from character to character.
Yeah, it was all.
Holiday, Edith Piaf.
It was all the great women singers I'd learnt to sing from through records who'd all died when they were about 46. So great lineup of singers. Sort of a little bit of a cheat in a way, because it gave me the opportunity to sing some really great songs which I wouldn't have been able to sing without a framework. So you couldn't get up as Billie Holiday and sing, "He beats me too, what can I do? Oh, my man, I love him so." But if you provided a framework, you could sing really awful songs, beautiful tunes with unfortunate lyrics, but providing a framework which is about women's lack of power. Most of these women, I mean, Judy Garland and Marilyn Monroe are the classics. They were incredibly powerful on stage, but off stage they had nothing. I mean, in the end, when people were throwing bread rolls at Judy Garland in the Talk of the Town in London, her last husband had sold a coal mine and every Garland performance and any intellectual property, anything she developed, for the rest of her life for $1. So when she was on stage earning that money, it all went directly to the IRS. She had no furniture and she had 3 children. It was, the level of cruelty was unbelievable, and yet still, when she was on form, she'd get up and people loved her, the same as Janis Joplin. We love you, Janis. Same as Marilyn Monroe. She tried to form her own company and everybody said, "You stupid bitch, what are you doing? You're just a blonde bombshell, silly girl." So they were all, and I personally think that's what killed them, and in a sense that's what the show was about, singing their songs but saying on the surface of things they were incredibly powerful and popular, but behind the scenes they were powerless, and it was the sort of dichotomy that killed them off. So the show was really about that. I loved doing it, but it was a marathon, and that's when about 1982 or 3 is when I stopped going to parties, because I couldn't. I had about an hour or 2 after the show where I could have a supper with 1 or 2 people and talk, but I really couldn't go anywhere where I had to shout or I was in smoke. So that was that.
Let's talk about the 90s and the last 15 years. You've been artistic director of festivals in Canberra initially,
Yep.
Adelaide,
Yep.
then Melbourne,
Yep.
then Tasmania, 2
Yes.
days on the island.
Yep.
What do you want to bring to these festivals? How do you see them?
I don't know.
I should say you're about to, in 2013, you were artistic director of the Centenary of Canberra Festival.
Yeah, and that's a job that I've been in for about a year now.
Living
So
mostly in Canberra now.
I'm spending a lot of time. I'm still resident in Adelaide, but I'm spending a lot of time in Canberra at the moment. And that's a year-long celebration. It's the whole of 2013, so it's the whole year. March the 12th is the birthday, for those of you who don't know the national capital. March the 12th, 1913, is when the wife of the Governor-General, Lady Denman, stood up in a paddock with, as it happens, we've got footage in the Film and Sound Archive. So there was pomp and ceremony, bagpipes, brass bands, Lady Denman, a foundation stone, and a curious number of dogs.
Keeping the sheep around
It's just bloody dogs everywhere. She stood up and she said on March the 12th, 1913, "This place shall be named Canberra and it will be pronounced Canberra." So that's the day they take as the birthday. But we are doing a whole lot of lead-ups at the moment like this. It's just such a great history. And I really want to re-invoke, I think, the symbolism of Canberra, what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they said we're a newly federated nation and we need a brand new capital. What guts to have an international competition to plan a city. We need to re-invoke that a little bit. I think if I divert a little bit, I think Canberra gets judged whether you like or dislike particular parties or politicians. And in fact, my feeling is our capital ought to sit above any particular government, and our governments and politicians ought to be judged on how well or how ill they safeguard the altruism that the city symbolises. I'd like to see that shift in our thinking, because I think that does happen with Washington. I think people think, you know, you've got to be as good as what Washington means for America. So it was this year that the surveys were complete, and marvellous people like Scrivener who went up into them. I mean, these are freezing cold, rugged mountains with their wives to lay out the borders. January the 1st, 1911, so we celebrate that next New Year's Day, was when the land was ceded from New South Wales. That's when the place went dry. You couldn't get a drink in Canberra for 18 years. Except Sly, when they opened Parliament, what was the first law they passed? It's fantastic. So there are lots. October this year is when the first major city planning event was held ever in London, and the idea of a new capital was born. We're doing a big project about the announcement of the competition, the 100th anniversary of the competition. So yes, I'm doing those things. Back to your question, I'm very bad at markets. You know, there have been various stages of my career where, you know, when I was singing lesbian feminist songs, everybody said there is a fantastic market in the United States. Go and corner it and you'll make a killing. And I didn't, because I had other things to do. Some people thought I should just stick to the Brett. My mentor, John Willett, tolerated everything that I did, but in fact he just wanted me to go on singing this classic cabaret. When I started writing plays, Richard Werrett said to me, I think you just should stay being a singer. Every step of the way people sort of said,
They
you
had a
know...
prize for you.
And unfortunately, I've never really looked at markets too much. So I kind of, in festivals, largely, apart from 10 Days on the Island, which was a very specific brief by the late Premier Jim Bacon, all the other festivals, when I got there, had been going for quite some time. So in that role as an artistic director, you were simply you're a guardian of the festival for a certain period, and you should look after it and you should extend it and make sure you leave it better than it was when you first came. I think my interest, I take these things on as an artist. I remember Fergus Linehan, who directed Sydney for a while, Fergus was fond of saying in various fora, what we do is so servile, you know, in the sense that all you're doing is serving artists and it's not actually creative. But for me, being the artistic director of a festival is absolutely a creative act. So I enjoy playing with the elements so that I make something whose narrative and impact is larger than just the simple sum of the parts. Now, I could say that links my whole practising professional life, because that's what Variety was. A good variety show with Dad was a whole lot of disparate elements, pop them in together. Accidentally, I came upon classic European cabaret of the 1920s and 30s. That too is putting together disparate elements and making a bigger story, and a festival is exactly the same. My festivals are always old, new, highly populist, free, at the very elite end of orchestral performance or any kind of art like that. I put them all together, but I want to put them together in a way that there's a thread and there's a big story around it. So for me, it's a great challenge, and that's why Canberra is an incredible challenge, because it's not just the arts we're doing, it's sports, science, Canberra as the incubator, Canberra as the creator and the nurturer of great ideas in education, democracy, science, and it's so fantastic. I had this great conversation with the CSIRO, and it turns out that we all have Canberra in us, since every bit of wheat that we eat was invented in Canberra. 70% of the world's wheat was invented in Canberra. Every plane that we get on has a piece of Canberra technology in it. So I'm encouraging the idea of this idea of Canberra's not a passive host of government or just the national collections, but it really is an incubator and a nurturer. So for me, the challenge is still the challenge to the artist of putting something really fantastic together. For the audiences, I mean, I think major festivals, and Canberra's no exception, have to be everything to everybody. It's what, you know, they've become big stakeholder surveys, if you like, in any state. For instance, in Adelaide, when there's often a bit of controversy in an Adelaide festival, and often the controversy comes from people who would never go to the festival. But there's a sense of ownership. Don't you do that? You know, don't you take your clothes off in my festival? That's, you know, don't you make fun of God in my festival? You know.
Let's steer off in a slightly different direction, and bearing in mind that the Centre for Social Impact's involved in the mobilising the not-for-profit sector, and you come from the not-profitable sector. There's a few questions I've got about about the role of creativity and also how this can be anchored in some of the spirit of the not-for-profit sector too. One issue is resilience thinking, which I know you're very interested in.
I am.
Just explain the relevance of that.
Yeah, well, for some people here who have blathered on about it, especially Julianne, you've heard it all before, but when I curated the Deakin Lectures a couple of years ago, I met through my cousin, who's a sociologist, a man called Brian Walker, who's ex-CSIRO and is now in the Resilience Alliance. Resilience Thinking, if you want to get a hold of the book, it's by Brian Walker and David Salt, small book by Island Press. Resilience Thinking came from an original economic theory, and Peter, you'd probably know who the person is. He's an Austrian, I think, yeah. And then environmentalists picked it up, and then I've sort of adapted it to the arts. I found it a very useful modelling for the way arts can be resilient, and I think Brian's feeling is that if you aim for resilience, sustainability takes care of itself. Sustainable is not something that resilience thinking...
So what is resilience thinking?
Well, their definition of resilience is the ability of any system to absorb disturbance without having wholly to change its nature and function. So you're prepared for any of the shocks that come. So if you use an environmental example, a forest will grow perfectly successfully for 100 or 150 years. At a certain point, it'll start to implode. But when the big trees are ready to go, there's a whole lot of undergrowth. And as long as you've actually preserved the undergrowth, there'll be really strong stuff ready to come up again. If you've cleared the undergrowth, if you actually wanted somebody to go in there and have a walk through it or a picnic place, or you just wanted to be neat and tidy, what will happen is a kind of chaotic event in which the big trees will go. And it's not an entirely bad thing, because if it implodes, nutrients are released for other life forms to take up, but you have to be prepared for a chaotic event. Everything's up for grabs. And they make the point that new forms are ready to pounce on this and really take the place of the forest, but it's not going to be usable for a very long time. So the thinking is that you ought to take care of the weeds, the undergrowth, let people who set fires get in there a little bit, just let all the feral activity happen so that this is all very, very healthy. Now, he says that the curse of resilience is efficiency, and that is that if you keep peeling away all the unprofitable bits, then you'll get something that looks like that, and if a big wind comes, it'll easily topple over. What you need to be doing is preserving a really strong undergrowth, a strong thing to the ground. So I suppose for me, and I spoke at the Global Resilience Alliance dinner in Canberra and got some really good responses, so I think it's not just me being a crackpot. But to me, what it means is that if all you do is take care of the beautiful, finished, polished, high-achieving elite end of the arts, and you don't actually encourage all what I call the ugly, the unknown and the unloved, the Van Goghs of this world who are just punching out stuff that nobody likes. If you don't actually... not everybody who gives art a go is going to be successful. They're not all going... Only time will tell whether what they were doing was really worth something great. But you've sort of got to have an attitude towards the ground and an infrastructure and network that allows people to have a go. And if they show a bit of a spark, actually encourage that and make sure that you can do that so that when the tall trees implode, as they will morph and change, whatever happens. And I think at the moment the global financial crisis has really shown some incredible examples of this. At the moment, every arts organisation in Britain is being asked to face a 10, 20 or 40% cut. And they're saying...
Government subsidy.
Government subsidy. And you'll be lucky if it's only 10%. The knee-jerk reaction will be to cut all the unprofitable bits, to get rid of the education, the community, all that, so that you can make sure that you've still got your 6 big shows every year or whatever it is. Resilience thinking would say knock out 1 or 2 of your big shows. That audience is already there. It will probably remain loyal to you. If not, to be frank, it's going to die off within 10 or 20 years anyway, and the audience you need to encourage is this lot down here. I think mainly for businesses having intimate access with an artist is a really good thing, because you just don't know what that artist's take on your business, and if businesses have to innovate, and I think that's a mantra that most businesses will take on, that you innovate or die. Artists are very good at stimulating that. And it was something that we made the point in the 2020 summit to say, artists by no means hold the only keys to creativity. All scientists, doctors, politicians need to be accountants, need to be creative.
Creative accounting.
That's right, exactly. They need to be creative. It's just that art can do it in a particularly, according to Ramachandran, a particularly effective and direct way. And it is also shock through beauty. I mean, and I'm not just talking about narrative stories. There's no doubt that you can walk into a room of particular colours and something can move you, and it can be life-changing. You know, you can actually walk out of an exhibition. I think of the recent success of the Emily Kangwari exhibition that was on at the museum and was so successful in Tokyo that, you know, people walk into those incredible statements of tens of thousands of years of tradition that also look like the most beautiful contemporary art. And something can be stirred inside you, or a piece of music. Sometimes I do talk about arts being the safe place to explore dangerous ideas. That if it's a narrative and it's a drama, and film does this as well. If you're confronted by a moral situation and you really get involved in the work and you're thinking, what would I do in that situation? This is a great way to test what would I do under those circumstances. You're sitting through a hypothetical, but it doesn't necessarily need to be just that. It could just be sheer sensual overload that changes you in some way. So I think having an intimate relationship with that with business would be very good. I think for people's staff and leaders to get up, we don't very often get the chance to get very close to artists. The fourth wall still exists, but if you really get so close to a dancer that your hair goes when they go past, you get a whiff of the BO on the stage, and you're close to the banging of the feet, or you really start to have a sensual appreciation of the bow going across the strings. I think it's a very special. I've had a couple of incidences where in that first gig in Canberra, I was giving, as a festival director, there was an exhibition of French art I can't remember what it was, but we pulled out from the stacks the Toulouse-Lautrec prints. I was doing some songs by Aristide Briand, the guy with the big black hat and the cape that Lautrec did posters of. And I was singing some of his songs, which I'd collected and translated. And I was taken through to the stacks, and they were showing me the original prints they had. And when the curator said, look at that fold, well, he would have done that. Like Lautrec would have made that fold in the paper, and I just went, I'm that close to it. That's very thrilling, and not many people get the opportunity to get that close to the real source of creativity. I think if you get into a partnership with an artist, you can get that close. I think it's really fantastic.
It's a delight talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.